I say again that the Prime Minister is not a feminist. He is not an ally to undermine my leadership at this early stage in such a willful, craven way. That is not the kind of politics that people in Canada should want to see. They should want to see me in Parliament meeting him on the battlefield of ideas. I'm asking again the Prime Minister to back off, and I'm telling him again that he has reaped what he has sown, and I want to know if he's happy.
Okay, Green Party leader Annamie Paul defending her leadership again today, again calling out the Prime Minister, blaming him and the Liberals for the recent turmoil existing within her own party. Where does her leadership stand after this week? Can she unite her party moving forward? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see everybody. Let's start, Althea, with you, and on that point that Annamie Paul has made now for a couple of days, that this has something to do with the Prime Minister and that he is somehow responsible for what is happening here.
Yeah, I think let's be clear, this has absolutely nothing to do with Justin Trudeau. Annamie Paul is like drowning and trying to grab at anything that she can to diffuse blame. This is a problem, it seems, of her own making. And if there's any blame to go around, it should go around in her own party. It is completely natural for a party leader to want to try to poach MPs from other parties. We've seen that continuously. Even Elizabeth May did that. Yeah. And so to have Annamie Paul stand there and say that this is somehow like Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould is outrageous, frankly, and pretty rich.
Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Justin Trudeau may be, as Ms. Paul charges, a fake feminist, but I'm not sure working to undermine opposition parties is evidence of that. That is the stuff, unfortunately, you might say. Maybe we should have a higher-minded view of politics than that, but it's pretty standard fare for political leaders to try to divide their opposition forces, to try to lure other party MPs to cross to their ranks. That is, pretty standard stuff of politics. So she does seem to be trying to kind of raise the stakes, if you will, on this beyond the specifics of this particular issue.
Chantal.
Well, if you're a feminist, I guess you wouldn't want to be suggesting that a female MP, Jenica Atwin, not to name her, that decides to change parties has no will of her own and has been hypnotized by a male prime minister. That doesn't sound terribly feminist to me to start with. Second, the moving on in other comments to Chrystia Freeland being just some person that a token person for the Prime Minister. It's not very feminist to go after accomplished women in other parties. It sounds to me like Madame Paul is either not getting any real advice or not listening to it.
Okay, so what is going on here beside the the issue of trying to blame someone else for the problems? How much is this hurting Annamie Paul's leadership, Althea?
It's hurting her leadership, and frankly, it's hurting the party. She says that she had a strong mandate, but the party was split. I mean, she basically she won on the 8th ballot with the 2,000 votes between her and the other candidate who represents a more militant part of the Green Party. And so already she kind of had a mountain to climb, but she was the favorite candidate of people like Elizabeth May. The bigger problem, I think, is that even those in her caucus don't see eye to eye with her on this Jenica Atwin thing. They want her to love her back, to welcome her with open arms, and basically to apologize. And Ms. Paul is digging her heels in and refusing to say, even if she agrees with the content of what her assistant said, just say that it was inappropriate for him to basically threaten sitting MPs. And she's still, she's had 2 press conferences so far this week, and still she refuses to say that that was an inappropriate comment from her aide. So I think until she does that, her problems will not go away.
And Andrew, is this about it is difficult to lead the Green Party because the Green Party is not sort of what you might call traditionally dealt with it the way other parties are, or is this about Annamie Paul's ability to lead the party?
I think there's fault on all sides. The party itself has a large faction within it that has, if I may say, wildly intemperate views on the Middle Eastern conflict, which they're entitled to, but it's guaranteed to create ill feeling and division within the party.
Sure.
That was compounded by Ms. Paul's advisor then basically publicly threatening to unseat the MPs who had voiced these expressions, and it sort of metastasized from there. On top of that, there's issues around Ms. Paul's style of leadership. Now, she has accused her critics of mouthing sort of racist and sexist tropes of, quote unquote, the angry black woman. And that's a fair charge, or can be. But what do you do if you have an individual in question who happens to be high-handed and autocratic, but is also a black woman? Do you just desist from making any criticism? Do you just back off and say any criticism is in and of itself evidence of racism, sexism? That's an open question. I think that's something the party is going to have to really wrestle with.
Yeah, Chantal?
Any chief of staff to any leader that would put in writing threats against sitting MPs, and even more so for a party that has worked really hard to work itself up to 3 seats, would have been in another party fired. And because that is totally displaced. Staffers do not threaten elected MPs with campaigning against them. Yes. How can that make any sense in any event? Yeah. Are you trying to clean up your caucus so you end up with 0 in the House of Commons? Because that is where this leads. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that there are many people who have been interested in the Green Party because of Elizabeth May and her rather positive approach to politics, right, and cooperative approach to politics. Those people are not interested in getting into an internal war over the Middle East within the membership of the Green Party, or watching the leaders settle scores. So what doesn't seem to be clear to Madame Paul at this point is that people can just stay home, or they can vote for other parties, but they don't whore their vote. And at this point, the messages she is sending is a turnoff for both her leadership and her party.
So how much of this is to do with the fact that Elizabeth May led this party for 13 years, I think, and when you lose a leader after that period of time, especially when the leader sticks around, just decided not to do the job anymore, that it is hard for parties to become something else, independent of what the leader was. We saw that a little bit, I think, with the Conservatives as Andrew Scheer tried to take over Stephen Harper's party. Althea, do you think that part of that is the challenge here?
Well, 2 things. I think, back to her accusations that the party, that some of the councillors were displaying sexist and racist behavior towards her. And the challenge is that she says that she was being held to a different set of standard than the previous leader, Elizabeth May. Right. Regardless of what identities the next leader had, they were always going to be held to a different standard than Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May basically embodied the Green Party. The Green Party was Elizabeth May, and she had a lot of leeway for a party leader that was never going to exist in the new leader. Has Elizabeth May's presence in the House made Annamie Paul's life more difficult? Yes, perhaps. Elizabeth May could have given her seat to Annamie Paul, and Annamie Paul would have had an easier time in the House of Commons. She would have been a presence in the House of Commons, and she wouldn't have been living under Elizabeth May's shadow. Yeah. Elizabeth May still in the House means that there is constantly that compare and contrast between the 2 leaders, and Ms. Paul is judged according to the Elizabeth May barometer for many Green Party members.
Andrew?
Ms. May was, let us recall, also subject to a formal inquiry on charges of bullying and harassment of her staffers. Mm-hmm. This is not an unknown charge against any leader. It's particularly not unknown within the Green Party, which has a particularly takes a dim view of high-handedness from the top. So that's that should be laid on the table as well. But yeah, the party was very much subsumed in Ms. May's personality. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was well known in the media, and it became almost cult-like, I would say. I think she, like you mentioned, Stephen Harper, I think you can be faulted for not preparing the ground for your succession, for not creating a lively leadership race to follow with strong contenders, so that you create the sense that the party is more than just the individual who leads it. And I don't think she has succeeded very well on that ground.
Chantal.
If I can just say, though, that Elizabeth May was not all of the Green Party. This is a party that has made significant inroads in Atlantic Canada at the provincial level. And that is why that defection really hurts the federal party, because it does have credible people in the legislature, in PEI, in New Brunswick, and to have the only federal MP that is elected outside of Elizabeth May's sphere of influence defect to the Liberals sends a pretty powerful message that federally the party is not as serious as some of its provincial wings. And having said, and I agree with everything that's been said about Elizabeth May's strong presence, but the Green Party's results in Atlantic Canada were not just Elizabeth May, they were also Greens in that region that in many ways are looking at this and thinking, I don't want to be in the mess that these people are in. It's a bit like the Reform, the Canadian Alliance, the Tories federally fighting, and provincial wings of the Progressive Conservative Party not wanting to be stuck in that environment.
Now it's more clear than ever that whatever the future holds for us, all of us, Quebec is a nation, a French nation, a nation with one official language, French, and one common language, French. And that is acknowledged by the federal parliament. This is quite important. Time will tell us how important. But it should refrain the Liberals from going against the will of Quebec in matters related to French language.
MPs passed the Bloc Québécois motion Yves-François Blanchet was referring to just there, acknowledging Quebec's right to unilaterally amend the Constitution to declare the province a nation with French as its only official language. All of this the same week that the Liberal government tabled legislation to strengthen the protection of French in Canada, updating the Official Languages Act. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all back for another round of that issue. A couple things. I mean, there was already a motion in Parliament recognizing the Québécois as a nation inside a united Canada. So I don't know what this changes. But does it speak more, I'll start with you, Chantal, to either the Bloc trying to wedge the Liberals in Quebec, to the Liberals' play for Quebec with its updated language policy? What do you think is happening there?
The review of the Official Languages Act was overdue and had been promised for a long time, and wasn't just called for by Quebec or the Quebec government. Actually, there was no call from the Quebec government, but French language minority groups outside Quebec had been asking for this, the Official Languages Commissioner. To the statement in the law, the bill that was brought forward this week that French is Quebec's official language. Well, it can't come as news to most Quebecers because I checked and it was declared the only official language in Quebec in 1974, for those who weren't born then, by Premier Robert Bourassa. And there it has stood since then. As for the Bloc Québécois motion, it referred by and large to Quebec's plan to unilaterally amend its section of the Constitution to state that Quebec is a nation who has French as its official and common language. But the motion basically asked the House of Commons to acknowledge that that was possible, which is what happened. I believe the Bloc probably usually benefits more when there's more pushback.
Yes.
The nation's motion that Stephen Harper took over actually did a lot of damage to the Bloc. It took away one of their quote-unquote core missions on Parliament Hill. We're the only ones who are fighting for this.
Yes.
And when you're trying to kick a door and the door is wide open, sometimes you just trip through it. It's not as much fun.
Yeah, Althea, that was what you had a long Twitter thread on this that was very smart. But that was sort of your point as well, that this might have been more advantageous if someone else had moved faster on it. But so does this benefit the Bloc, I guess? Does this hurt the other parties? How do you read what happened there?
Okay, so a few things, and pardon, I hope I'm not too lengthy, but so there is the motion, the block motion is not the same thing as what's in the Quebec Bill 96. So I think we really need to be clear that these are separate things. Yeah. And actually, what the block motion does, when you read it, it only says recognize that the provinces, including Quebec, have a right to unilaterally amend their provincial constitution. So like acknowledge a fact, yes, and take note that Quebec wants to amend the Constitution in the ways outlined as the clip from Mr. Blanchet said. Okay, we take note that yes, Quebec, maybe not all Quebecers, but the government of Quebec wants to do this. So on the face of it, it can be a very non-controversial motion. But the danger was always that it would come to mean a lot more. And the Liberals, frankly, bungled this issue completely. They could have, just as Harper did in 2006 when he saw Gilles Duceppe about to table a motion about the Québécois nation, that he decided to trump that move in a surprise by introducing a motion that recognized the Québécois nation in a united Canada. The Liberals could have basically tried to make the Bloc's motion moot and to address the fears of a lot of the MPs who did not vote in favor of it, who abstained from voting. But instead, they let the Bloc have, I believe, a win. I think all federal parties, the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Liberals, are guilty of not working together to try to avoid giving the Bloc win. Because when you read the stories about what happened over the vote this week, they read like the House of Commons has agreed to Quebec's plans as outlined in Bill 96, which is not what the motion said, which is why people like perhaps Michael Chang voted in favor of it. Yeah. Michael Chang, who resigned his seat in cabinet back in 2006 over the Québécois nation. Yeah. There's a danger of words coming to take more meaning than the meaning that is actually on paper. And I think that's the danger we're seeing now. And now the Bloc has to say, hey, because of us, the House of Commons did this. Of course, it never would have done this without the Bloc, and so the Bloc gets to prove its usefulness.
Yeah. Just for the record, that is not how this motion is being portrayed in French language coverage. And the understanding here is that the motion dealt with the constitutional plan and not an endorsement of Bill 96. Just saying.
I also wondered
but
whether...
in English Canada, that's the case.
That maybe is the problem of English-speaking journalists.
But I wondered, though, whether, Andrew, humor me here, whether it could not also have been seen as a loss by the Bloc, because the Liberal Party preemptively, as Chantal says, rightfully needed to update the official languages policy. But that also pulls away, I think, some of the fire, the ammunition the Bloc has against the government, because it is very much in line with the kinds of things that François Legault was looking for.
I agree there is rhetorical value and indeed some basic fairness in the federal government being seen to be as much of a defender of the French language within Canada as the government of Quebec. That is all well and good. The motion, the Bloc motion, I think is a different kettle of fish. It's hard to call it a defeat, I think, for the Bloc when the rest of the parties are basically dancing to its tune. It may be that in the short term, as was suggested, that it deprives it of a grievance. But in the longer term, you are establishing a rhetorical platform from which to make further demands. And I think that is the frankly, of the Stephen Harper motion. Far from leaving Quebec feeling more at ease within the Federation, more at ease with the minorities within its midst, we've had continuing issues ever since, and they're compounded by the rhetoric of we're a nation, nations have rights. How dare you suggest that we can't for example, prevent observant religious minorities from working within certain sections of the public sector. I think that we may rue the day that we pass this. For one thing, it may be an influence on, ultimately it's going to be the courts that are going to decide, not Parliament, whether Quebec can unilaterally amend the Constitution in this way. And the courts don't like to get in the way when they see comity between the federal and provincial governments. So the degree to which Parliament is ratifying this may have an influence and may lead to court decisions that everyone disavows. Everyone claims, oh, this is just language. It won't have actual effect on either the Charter of Rights or the Division of Powers. This may actually help to encourage that it does have some legal impact.
Chantal, then Althea, then I got to go. Yeah.
2 points. On the power of parliamentary motions, heavily backed parliamentary motions on courts decisions, I'm just going to take you back to another kind of motion, that was heavily supported in the House of Commons, and that is the motion two decades ago, that stipulated that marriage in Canada was strictly between a man and a woman. Yeah, right. And how much that influenced the courts when it was decided
that wasn't about federal versus provincial thing. That's
no,
my point.
but to your other point about not the nation resolution not having increased Quebecers' comfort within the Federation, I'll just note that from the time of that, and I'm not saying that's the main cause, but from that time to today, the Parti Québécois virtually vanished, and as did sovereignty from the Quebec radar. So it did not embolden Quebec nationalism towards secession. That is also a fact.
Yeah, I also, and I'll put that to you, Althea, I also wondered whether this was more about the Bloc trying to prove its relevance again. But I take both of your and Andrew's points. I think they're very good ones. But I also wondered whether some of it was about that, trying to demonstrate that they have influence to Quebecers.
Well, I think they were hoping to sow division within party caucuses, which did succeed, except in the end, nobody actually opposed it. They abstained. And even then, I think a lot of people were kind of convinced to vote in favor, regardless of their own personal concerns. Many concerns about the legal weight this might hold. That was a concern that we heard a lot from MPs. And then the fear that you were giving meaning and tacit approval to what the government of Quebec wanted to do. The Bloc is always faced with well, why would you vote for the Bloc instead of voting for an MP who can form part of a government? The Bloc is not useful. And so this is clearly something they can point to say, see, we are useful. Right. Yeah. And it's not just a none of the above vote. We can actually push something and get things done. And I think, hearing Blanchet talk this morning, that now the Liberal government doesn't have the moral authority to oppose things, and they have to give the Quebec nation their rights to full expression. I think we'll hear a lot more about that. I think it's just opened a whole can of worms.
Okay, and
but the real question is, does it resonate? Are people dancing in the streets? I'm looking outside. It's very sunny, but they're not dancing in the streets over this because Andrew, it's kind of a non-event.
Andrew, last point. Yeah.
I'll just say that the measure of Quebec's ease within the Confederation is not just whether they're prepared to support overt separatist parties, but whether they're prepared to participate in federal programs in a wholehearted way. It certainly hasn't led to the decline of the Bloc's support. The Bloc is back, and they may well win the most seats in the next election.
Okay, but man, the next election, if we have one, this is going to be a good conversation. Every day I'm going to make you come on. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm joking. I won't. Goodbye. Thank you.